Hayley moved through her days with the quiet confidence of someone who believed she was finally in control of her own life. Every choice felt deliberate, every step forward earned after years of reacting instead of acting. She told herself that independence meant trusting her instincts, even when unease brushed against the edges of her certainty. What she did not see was how carefully those instincts had been shaped, redirected, and subtly constrained. Long before Hayley reached any conclusion, the path toward it had already been cleared, smoothed, and fenced in by someone who understood her fears better than she understood herself. Leslie's anger had never been loud. It did not erupt in reckless gestures or careless mistakes. It lived in patience, in the discipline of waiting and watching. She carried the resentment of being underestimated, of being pushed aside while others claimed moral superiority they did not deserve. To Leslie, manipulation was not cruelty but correction. The world, as she saw it, rewarded hypocrisy and punished honesty, and she refused to be punished again. Hayley represented both a means and a mirror, someone pliable enough to be guided, yet strong enough to take the fall when the consequences arrived. Leslie convinced herself that what she was doing was necessary, even elegant. Every variable was accounted for, every risk measured. The plan did not rely on force, but on inevitability, and that was what made it flawless. The upcoming gala provided the perfect stage. Excess and spectacle created a fog in which accountability dissolved. Wealthy guests would move through glittering rooms without noticing the fractures beneath the surface. Leslie designed the Occident with meticulous restraint. It needed to appear spontaneous, the kind of misfortune people mourn briefly before rationalizing away. A wet floor here, a malfunction there, a moment of distraction at precisely the wrong time. The brilliance of the plan lay in its banality. Nothing extraordinary would happen, and that ordinariness would protect everyone involved. Hayley, unaware of the trap closing around her, felt a growing tension she could not name. Anger flared at unexpected moments, directed at people who seemed to question her judgment or slow her progress. She interpreted the irritation as proof of strength, mistaking pressure for clarity.
In truth, the anger was a response to something deeper, a subconscious recognition that her choices were narrowing, that the freedom she celebrated felt increasingly rigid. She dismissed these doubts, clinging to the belief that control meant silencing hesitation. Each time she did, she stepped closer to the edge Leslie had prepared. Lynette existed on the periphery of this carefully balanced system, an unresolved variable that refused to settle into place. She possessed knowledge she had never fully intended to acquire, fragments of truth gathered over time and stitched together by instinct rather than design. That knowledge weighed on her, producing its own form of anger, not explosive but corrosive. She resented being made a custodian of secrets she never asked to keep, resented the way silence had been forced upon her by fear and loyalty in equal measure. Walking away had seemed like the only way to breathe again, yet distance did not erase responsibility. If anything, it sharpened it. Bill understood this better than anyone. His motivation was not altruism, but survival, layered with a gnawing sense of guilt he refused to acknowledge openly. He had spent years convincing himself that control was synonymous with protection. Bringing Lynette back into the fold was not about justice, it was about leverage. He needed her piece of the puzzle, not to dismantle the game, but to flip it. Bill's internal conflict manifested as urgency masked by calculation. He was furious at the possibility of losing control, furious at the way circumstances threatened to expose how fragile his authority truly was. Yet beneath that fury lay fear, the fear that this time manipulation might not be enough. As the event drew closer, the pressure intensified for everyone involved. Leslie began to feel the strain of maintaining perfection. Her anger sharpened into paranoia, each unexpected detail registering as a potential threat. She told herself that doubt was weakness, but the very need to repeat that mantra revealed cracks in her resolve. The plan depended on timing, and timing depended on variables that could not all be commanded. The closer she came to execution, the more she recognized how much she stood to lose if even one element slipped out of alignment. Hayley, sensing the mounting tension without understanding its source, reacted by doubling down on decisiveness.
She pushed herself harder. ignored warning signs, and dismissed the concern of those around her as attempts to undermine her autonomy. Her anger became a shield against vulnerability. Acknowledging uncertainty would mean admitting that she might be wrong, that her confidence might be borrowed rather than earned. That admission felt intolerable. In clinging to control, she unknowingly fulfilled Leslie's expectations, moving exactly as anticipated. Lynette's conflict reached a breaking point as she realized that distance no longer equaled safety. The knowledge she carried was becoming dangerous, not because she intended to use it, but because others were beginning to sense its existence. Anger surged, not only at Leslie's manipulation or Bill's machinations, but at herself for believing she could simply step away. Every option before her carried consequences she could not escape. Staying silent meant allowing harm to unfold. Speaking up meant stepping back into a world she had fought to leave behind. The choice felt less like a decision and more like a surrender to inevitability. Bill's efforts to retrieve Lynette intensified, driven by the recognition that time was no longer on his side. His anger turned outward, directed at obstacles that refused to move as expected. Yet the more pressure he applied, the more resistance he encountered, forcing him to confront the possibility that his influence had limits. That realization threatened his self-image, igniting a deeper rage rooted in humiliation. Control had always been his refuge. Without it, he faced a version of himself he despised. As the gala loomed, the emotional landscape grew volatile. Leslie's confidence hardened into obsession. Hayley's certainty calcified into recklessness. Lynette's silence became an unbearable weight. Bill's calculations narrowed into desperation. Each character was driven by personal motives that collided rather than aligned, creating a network of tension so tightly wound that release seemed inevitable. Betrayal hovered, not as a singular act, but as a spectrum of choices, each compromise, each withheld truth contributing to the coming collapse. By the time the first guests would step into the glittering hall, the outcome would no longer depend on any single plan or intention. It would be shaped by accumulated anger, by internal conflicts left unresolved, and by decisions made under the illusion of control. What appeared from the outside as a night of celebration would, beneath the surface, be the convergence point of resentment, fear, and ambition. And when the moment finally arrived, the consequences would not feel sudden at all. They would feel earned, the inevitable result of lives pushed to their limits, where every character, cornered by their own choices, could only react in the most destructive way they knew.